Hey everybody! This video includes an exclusive preview of the new revised Great Old One Warlock subclass from the upcoming Dungeons & Dragons 2024 Players Handbook, and the whole video is sponsored by Wizards of the Coast. If you just want to check out the preview and you're not interested in anything else, there's a timestamp on the screen right now, as well as a link in the description that will take you directly to that part of the video. You can also pre-order the new 2024 Players Handbook by using the link in the video description as well. I totally get it if you're here just to see the new rules for the Great Old One Warlock. It's not a problem, please feel free to skip ahead. But if you're interested, I'm going to start this video talking a little bit about what a Warlock is, how to approach it mechanically, and then later I'll go over some things you may want to keep in mind regarding your Warlock's relationship with their patron. No gimmicks, no gags, let's just get right into it. So whether you're a new DM or a veteran, if you have a player who wants to play a Warlock, there are some things you should consider about what a Warlock is before we start getting into the nitty and gritty elements of DMing for them. Fluff-wise, a Warlock is a character who has made a deal with a powerful magical being, forging a pact with them, and typically this involves the person offering their services or their soul in exchange for magical power and assistance. They are the archetypical Faustian bargain. Depending on the subclass they pick, it can quite literally be a character who's made a deal with the devil. Mechanically, Warlocks are a bit of an odd class in D&D terms. They get access to spells like a sorcerer or bard, but they can only cast a very small number of them. They only get 2 or 3 spell slots, and they regain their spells after a short rest, not a long one. They also have access to Eldritch Invocations, which are additional spells, spell-like abilities, or passive powers that give them other tools and tricks to use. This often results in Warlocks being very good at short encounters where their limited spell slots and abilities can have impact, or situations where lots of encounters are strung together and the party can take plenty of short rests. They pair really well with fighters, rogues, barbarians, and other classes that are less reliant on long rests, like clerics, wizards, sorcerers, etc. Warlocks are also pretty handy in non-combat situations. Being a charisma class, they tend to be good at social interactions, they often have utility spells and powers to help them out, as well as offer nice exploration support as well with teleports and things like that. When you're building out your adventures, if you have a Warlock in the party, I would definitely advise you to consider these elements carefully. Think about your encounters, how many rests, short and long, you expect the party to have between them, and if there are ways for the party to circumvent those encounters with clever trickery, manipulation, etc. A Warlock player might feel frustrated if they have to go several encounters in a row without a short rest in between, or very long encounters, as they will quickly run out of spell slots and abilities to use, and they'll probably be a bit bored. Honestly, I think this might be where the meme about Warlocks and Eldritch Blast comes from. When you only have 2 spell slots and most of your other class features recharge on a long rest, you're pretty much reliant on a good cantrip to see you through combat. But mechanics aren't the only things to note about Warlocks. For me personally, I see Warlocks as a class that has role-playing built into it. I think the same thing about Paladins and Clerics, to be honest, as well. These classes have an intrinsic and important relationship with something in the world. Of course, your specific campaigns or homebrew rules may allow for something different, but a cleric typically has a connection with their deity and is expected to follow and bolster the beliefs and teachings of that deity. Some DMs and players like to play with the idea of a deity's favor, and if a player character goes against their god or deity, there might be severe consequences. A paladin typically swears an oath. That might be to a deity. In older editions, paladins had to choose a god like clerics did and were very much holy warriors. But today, it might be a certain kingdom or an ideal. Regardless of what it is, the oath a paladin swears is something their character is expected to follow and adhere to. They are bound by rules or codes or expectations. And again, if they fail to uphold them, there can be consequences. And in the same fashion, a Warlock has made a deal with some powerful being or source of magic. They offer something to the being and in return are given magical powers and special abilities. Some DMs also throw in other more RP benefits like knowledge about something the player character wants, promises of revenge against their enemies, or a place of social standing. This pact is a key part of the Warlock's character. The nature of that pact, the type of creature they've made a bargain with, and what sorts of things their patron wants in return are all key questions and are as as important to a Warlock's character as the subclass features and spells a patron provides. Now, every table is different. If you're playing a D&D game that is more about killing cool monsters, looting dungeons, and cracking jokes, well, maybe the relationship with your patron isn't so important. Maybe you're playing a very tactical game and you just want to play a Warlock because their powers are cool and useful. That's fine. But if that's the case, make sure you and the DM both understand that's what you want. On the other hand, and I would expect that the vast majority of people who choose to play a Warlock are doing this, some players specifically want to explore that patron relationship and the nature of their bargain. It's one of the most interesting and iconic parts of the class, so it's important to not disregard it or not invest into it. So if you have a Warlock player or you want to play a Warlock in a game yourself, I'd recommend you sit down and talk about why they or you want to play this class and the expectations of that Warlock patron relationship. We'll chat more about the types of relationships a Warlock might have with their patron and how you can use it in the second part of this video. But for now, let's take a look at the new Great Old One subclass from the 2024 Players Handbook. Firstly, we're given a very short bit of a fluff for the subclass as an introduction, which suggests a few different Old One patrons to use, such as Tharizdun the Chained God, Dendar the Night Serpent, or even old Squidface Cthulhu itself. Now, a big change for the 2024 revised D&D rules is that all classes now unlock their subclass at level 3. Previously, Warlocks picked their specific patron at level 1, which I think was a lot more sense from an RP's perspective, but I imagine this change has been made for balancing and design purposes, perhaps as well to help new players learn the basics of their class before picking up additional powers and abilities that might be a bit confusing. I personally still work with my players to establish their patron at level 1 and then seal the deal at level 3 when they formally pick the subclass, same way I would with clerics and paladins and some of the other classes as well. But anyway, at level 3, when a player chooses this subclass, they get 3 features: Awakened Mind, Patron Spells, and Psychic Spells. Awakened Mind allows the Warlock to form a telepathic connection with any creature as a bonus action. The target has to be a creature they can see within 30 feet, and once established, the connection allows you to telepathically speak to one another whilst you are within X number of miles, where X is equal to your charisma modifier. You also need to use a shared language for this communication to work. The connection lasts for a number of minutes equal to your Warlock level, ending early if you use it on a new creature, but there's no limit to how many times you can use it, so it could potentially be done indefinitely as long as you can see the target and they are within 30 feet of you to at least initiate the bond. Some changes from the previous version here: it's now limited to a single creature at a time, whilst before it was any creatures within 30 feet of you, but once the connection is established, you can now separate out to quite a distance. The connection has a time limit now. Previously, it was just an always-on type thing, and the wording of the shared language element has been made clearer and more defined as well. Patron Spells. This is a change I imagine applies to all Warlock patrons now. This feature grants you several spells for free, as in you learn them for free, not that you can cast them for free. At 3rd level, you learn Detect Thoughts, Dissonant Whispers, Phantasmal Force, and Tasha's Hideous Laughter. At 5th level, you learn Clairvoyance and Hunger of Hadar. At 7th level, you learn Confusion and Summon Aberration, and at 9th level, you learn Modify Memory and Telekinesis. Psychic Spells. The last of the level 3 features and a brand new one not used in the old version, Psychic Spells allows you to turn any damage type from a spell you cast into psychic damage. In addition, when you cast a Warlock spell that is enchantment or illusion, you can do so without verbal or somatic components. At level 6, you gain Clairvoyant Combatant. This is a sort of rework of the previous version's Entropic Ward ability. Clairvoyant Combatant allows you to force a creature you've used Awakened Mind on to make a Wisdom saving throw against your spell DC. On a failed save, that creature has disadvantage on attacks against you, and you have advantage on attack rolls against it for the duration of the bond, so a number of minutes equal to your Warlock level. Once you use this feature, you must finish a short or long rest to regain it, or you can expend a Pact Magic spell slot, no action, to restore it. At level 10, the Great Old One Warlock gains Eldritch Hex. You learn the Hex spell, and when you cast Hex and choose an ability, the target also has disadvantage on saving throws of the chosen ability for the duration of the spell. You also get Thought Shield at level 10. Thought Shield stops other creatures reading your mind or contacting you telepathically unless you allow it. It grants you psychic resistance, and if a creature deals psychic damage to you, you can make that creature take the same amount of psychic damage you did. Finally, at level 14, you get the subclass feature Create Thrall. This is a rework of the same ability in the previous version of the Great Old One Patron subclass. Now, Create Thrall modifies your Summon Aberration spell, so it no longer requires concentration and changes the spell's duration to 1 minute. The summoned creature gets temporary hit points equal to your Warlock level and your Charisma modifier, and in addition, the first time each turn the summoned aberration hits a creature you have cast Hex on, the creature deals extra psychic damage equal to the bonus damage of the Hex spell. So overall, the Great Old One has had a couple of its abilities revised and a number of completely new ones added. My first thoughts for this subclass is that it feels very strong combat-wise. Psychic spells allowing you to turn your spell's damage type to psychic damage is amazing. Not many creatures are resistant to psychic damage, and if they are, well, you just don't have to change it. But I think there's also a powerful combo once you hit level 10. Using the Eldritch Hex ability, you can cast Hex on a target and choose Wisdom, meaning they have disadvantage on Wisdom saving throws. Then you can use Awakened Mind to form a telepathic bond with the target and use Clairvoyant Combatant as part of that, which requires a Wisdom saving throw, now at disadvantage, remember. If the target fails, that creature always has disadvantage on attacks against you, and you always have advantage on attacks against it. From the rules, I didn't see a way for a creature to end this effect. There's no saving throw at the end of their turn or anything like that, so as long as you don't get knocked out, it stays around for like 10 or more minutes. Against certain enemies, and especially solo encounters, this is going to be really, really good and very strong. Now, I don't know if all of the other subclasses also got a nice big power boost. Maybe the new monsters did too, so I can't comment on what is and isn't balanced yet, but in terms of gut feeling, this subclass feels very strong. Outside of the Awakened Mind feature and some of the Patron spells, pretty much all of the subclass features are combat-based, which I think is a bit of a shame and perpetuates the idea that D&D is purely a combat game. I think this could have been a cool subclass to give some non-combat features to. I know there will be spells and invocations for that, but as a Warlock is so limited on spell slots, I do think that at least one of these combat features could have been tailored to either social encounters or exploration, something that ties into the themes of strange, unfathomable knowledge, visions of the future or past, or getting to ask the DM questions about a personal situation, something like that. But I guess those kinds of powers are difficult to balance across millions of D&D games and needs a strong sense of trust between DM and player. Overall, I think the new Great Old One Warlock seems to be a ton of fun to play, if a bit too good in all honesty. I'd have loved to have seen more non-combat abilities, and also frankly I think the theme of Great Old Ones is a bit naff. I'm not a huge fan of Cthulhu and stuff like that, and I think the name might put people off. I think this subclass works great as just Psychic Warlock, and could represent a character who wants a Jean Grey, Phoenix-style character, or somebody who picks up a psionic artifact and gets mind powers from it. You could also easily use it in the setting of Eberron for the Kalash start and the Kawari, which is really, really fitting, and one of my favorite settings. Thanks again, Wizards, for sponsoring this video and giving me this exclusive first look at the Great Old One Warlock Patron in the 2024 Players Handbook. Don't forget to pre-order it using the link in the video description below. So one thing I mentioned when looking at that Great Old One preview was that I wasn't a huge fan of the specific patrons it mentions and the idea of old ones in general, but that I like the feel and theme of the class features. It's an obvious tip, but don't feel beholden to using the specific archfey, fiends, celestials, genies, or magic weapons described in the books as the Warlock's patron. If the class features can fit another concept, even if it requires a bit of reskinning or reflavoring, there's no harm in it. If a player really likes the idea of a psychic warlock type character, but doesn't want to deal with creepy tentacles and far realm nonsense, you could easily use this subclass with a strange psionic archfey or a sentient psionic crystal instead. You could even swap out some of the patron spells that don't make sense, like Hunger of Hadar, for something else. Something that has worked really well for me is to make the process of becoming a warlock or leveling up as one a more interactive experience, and to tie gaining class features, especially subclass ones, into story moments and activities in the game. Coming up are some spoilers for my current High Rollers campaign, by the way, so plug your ears if you don't want to know. I recently had a character die unexpectedly in my latest campaign, and rather than relying on the party to try and go get them resurrected, I had that player go on a weird planar pilgrimage across a horrid undead land, as was fitting for their character story and background. During this time, the party leveled up, and the player expressed wanting to multi-class her character and was considering Warlock. During the solo adventure, which I ran alongside the other players doing so in like short cut-to bursts, the player gained her new first level Warlock features after certain events and encounters as part of that solo adventure. The player absolutely loved this, and she said it made it really feel like she had earned those powers and cemented the deal she made with the patron. This doesn't just have to be for multi-classing either. When your players level up, have the Warlock's patron meet them in a dream, or send them a servant to deliver a gift that then unlocks or grants them their new subclass features. Done every time, it's a bit much, but for big features or ones that a player is especially excited about, it can make for a really fun game moment. And there's no reason you can't do this with other classes either. It just happens to work really well with Warlock specifically. The relationship a Warlock has with their patron can take many forms. The relationship could be a classic hostile one, a trickster devil who gets someone into a contract without knowing all the details and now uses them as their own little pawn, threatening the Warlock's soul if they disobey, kind of like Will and Mizora in Baldur's Gate 3. Or it could be a powerful sentient magic weapon that forges a bond with the Warlock and initially acts loyal and benevolent, but slowly tries to corrupt and twist the Warlock to their own will and desires. But it doesn't have to be like that. There's nothing to say that a Warlock can't have a positive relationship with their patron. A half-elf who forges a Warlock pact with their great archfey uncle, who sees the Warlock as a little kid to spoil with gifts of magic and games, maybe asking them to deal with some pests, goblins, trolls, a burgeoning human settlement encroaching on the woodland, every now and then like it's mowing the lawn or babysitting a pet. You could have a Warlock patron who keeps it very businesslike. They agree fair terms and exchange magic and power for services or payment. A fiend who rewards their Warlock with new spells and powers in exchange for soul coins, or a great old one who exchanges sacrifices for boons and power. And of course, the relationship can be fickle and nuanced too. Maybe that friendly archfey uncle gets a bit mad and takes it out on the Warlock when they don't come to their birthday party like they said they would. Maybe the trickster fiend who's always trying to get one over the Warlock genuinely starts to like and care for them and offers them help for free. Just this once, you understand. It's not like I like you or anything, mortal. Another thing to consider is how active, reactive, or passive the relationship with a patron is. An active relationship is one where the patron is regularly present and will actively involve themselves in what the Warlock is doing. This could be the patron summoning the Warlock to speak to them on a regular basis, or using a familiar to spy and communicate with them. A reactive relationship is one where the patron only responds or gets involved when the Warlock does specific things. Maybe they did something against the pact, or they did a specific thing to gain favor with the patron. It might be when the Warlock uses certain spells or performs more esoteric rituals like saying the patron's name 3 times in a mirror or something like that. A passive relationship is one where the patron only communicates with the player when the player wants. The patron may still be able to rescind their powers or do other things like that, but they can't communicate or harm the Warlock unless the Warlock actively chooses to summon them. And again, maybe that's through specific rituals or trinkets or spells, etc. What's key is to talk to the Warlock player and establish what they're okay with. A player who wants to have a positive BFF relationship with their patron and feels uncomfortable with hostility and manipulation or abusive behavior should have those wishes respected. A player might be keen for a patron to be cruel and tricksy, but they want to retain some control and would prefer a reactive or passive relationship to balance it out. It can be very fun to lay out the details of the patron relationship, the contract, and all the rituals and esoteric elements of the pact beforehand. A player who knows they can speak to a herald of their patron by standing in a ring of fire and reciting a poem in Infernal could have a ton of fun revealing that in play for the first time. Or you could write up a physical contract for them to keep and read and reference to when they need it to make that relationship feel really special and unique, which is why that player probably wanted to play a Warlock in the first place. That is all the time I have for this video, unfortunately, and if you liked it and would like more advice and tips for DMing D&D or other TTRPGs or anything roleplay related at all, please let me know in the comments. Until then, I'll see you next time, friends. Take care. Bye-bye.